Nuffield Scholars, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and a privilege to chair this first session at conference. Thank you, Helen, for the opportunity and the invitation. I'd also like to thank Irene for his opening address and HSBC for their ongoing support of the conference, and also Nuffield Wales. We appreciate that. I'm going to paraphrase Irene a little bit, because I think what he said was the Cardiff conference in 2013 was the best conference he's ever been to. And I have to say, I totally agree with him. It's great. Yeah. So moving on to what this is all really about, the presenting scholars, this first session is called Market-Led Agriculture. Our first presenter is Caroline Mitchell. Caroline has 14 years' experience working with meat quality supply chains, having previously been Director of Meat Science for JSR Genetics. She recently started her own company, FQM Global, working with global partners advising on the optimization of supply chains for meat quality. She enjoys bouldering, scuba diving, and beekeeping, presumably not all at the same time. She invites anyone interested in attending next year's International Congress of Meat Science and Technology to please get in touch. Caroline's topic is Carcass Grading and Payment Systems to Improve the Eating Quality of UK Meat. Please welcome our first scholar, Caroline.
Thank you, Wyn. Ladies, gentlemen, colleagues and friends, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Nuffield Farming Scholarship Trust and the Worshipful Company of Butchers for giving me the opportunity to do my study tour looking at carcass grading and payment systems to improve eating quality of UK meat. My topic started with a very simple question. Why do we produce meat? And on face value, the answer is really simple. We're producing meat for the consumer. If we don't have a consumer, we don't have an industry. The consumer brings money into our supply chain, everything else just wooden dollars moving up and down. When we look at red meat production across all three meat species, we export and import significant quantities. Now, I realise that these figures are very simplistic for what is a very complex global market. However, one thing we do know is that importing meat from countries that do look at meat quality. For example, there are main European pork abattoirs which are using human nose scoring to assess for boar taint in pig meat. We are a zero castration pig production system, and we aren't doing this. Across the board, at least a third of what we produce is exported. We are competing for global market share against other meat-producing countries, some of which already assess and reward producers for meat quality. We are also exporting to countries such as Japan, who place a significant amount of value on meat quality. So as a country who exports roughly of 1/3 of what we produce, we also need to consider who is our consumer. The UK red meat production is governed by UK legislation, our environment, etc. But we aren't producing meat exclusively for the UK consumer. So speaking with a broad brush, we can break down consumers to Western and Eastern. If you think of the Western consumer, traditionally it's a meat and 3 veg meal. You have your chunk of meat, your vegetables, your carbohydrate, traditionally potato in the UK. The meat is cooked and prepared in the kitchen with minimal seasoning. Salt, pepper. Instead, we add flavourings such as applesauce, mint sauce for lamb, gravy to the dish at the table. And our eating utensils reflect the way that we have evolved around meat. We have a knife, we have a fork. We are cutting down the meat to bite-sized pieces at the table. If you consider the Eastern consumer, they prepare meat in a very different way. When it comes to the table, it is already fully seasoned, either in a curry sauce or a broth, with lots of flavours, spices are used. The meat is bite-sized. Their eating utensils reflect this. They're either using chapatis, rice, their hands to consume the meat, or chopsticks. There is no allowance to break down that meat into bite-sized pieces. It is presented as such. So, knowing not only who is our consumer, we then have to ask, what does the consumer want? Now, depending on where the consumer is based, their priorities change. So, if at point of purchase, you might be in a country like China, where traditionally there have been food scares, for you, your main point of decision making might be because you're looking for food safety. If, however, in the UK, your main point of decision might be price. There are many factors that affect the picking up of the product, but it is the organoleptic or eating quality that will guarantee whether or not you get a repeat purchase. And we know organoleptic quality includes visual appearance. If we can't get the consumer to pick the product off the shelf, we've already lost the battle. We then have to guarantee that the consumer has an eating experience that meets their expectations so that they will go back and buy the product again. And scientifically, we know that there are three key areas to go into affect the acceptability of that product: juiciness, texture, flavour. They're key main areas that we're going to look in combination to give the consumer a significant eating experience. And by managing those three factors, we should be able to manage meat eating quality. If you don't measure it, you don't manage it. Now, farmers in the UK are paid based on the amount of lean meat that they produce. Simplistically, the profit in the UK supply chains is driven by producing large amounts of red meat as cheaply as possible, obviously within legislative and assurance scheme constraints. At present, within supply chains, we measure such traits as prolificacy, day live weight gain, feed conversion ratio, lean meat percentage. None of these traits put the consumer's eating experience at the forefront. Within the UK, we do have supply chains, admittedly, that reward for eating quality. However, these are the exception and not the rule. The majority of meat produced in the UK has not been assessed for eating quality. And remember, if we don't measure it, we can't manage it. So, having considered the general lack of eating quality assessment within the UK, I considered how best to change the business drivers, and the obvious answer to me, unfortunately, was money. If we reward producers for meat quality, then breeding decisions will change, so that eating quality is included in their decisions. It is also hoped that by producing a product that meets the consumer expectations, where more money will enter the supply chain, either by increasing demand or the ability to premiumise the product. An example of such a supply chain would be Kobe beef. It is a world-recognised product. Everybody knows it. The Japanese market is very, very proud of what they produce. And interestingly, pound for pound, Kobe beef markets at more than a Ferrari. So we already know the current payment and assessment systems used by the UK processors, Europe beef and lamb, lean meat percentage for pork, do not correlate well with eating quality. This is nothing new, we already know this. And in fact, AHDB went to press and said that the current systems of carcass grading used in Great Britain is completely outdated. They believe it is holding back the development of the industry by failing to adequately communicate consumer demand back to the processors and the producers. So with all that in mind, I decided to have a look at how other countries assess meat quality and how the change in business drivers is being created. I went to multiple European countries because, as our nearest neighbours, they're also our biggest competitors. I went to Japan because, as already mentioned, they have the Kobe beef, they have Wagyu, obviously also internationally known. Kurabuto pork, less known, but very, very big brand over there. I went to Australia because they have the MLA, Meat Livestock Australia. They have a very well-known Meat Standard Australia grading system. And the US, because interestingly, while they have more meat scientists per capita than any other country, all working at the forefront of developing meat eating quality, they're also the one country that has really made a road into making food a commodity and not an occasion. And like I said, I went to France. This is Uniporc West. France is one of our closest neighbours. This is a museum of obsolete equipment that they have in their head office. The optical grading probe, the probe that we use for the entirety of the pig industry, is featured in their obsolete equipment. Our nearest neighbour thinks so little of us. I said I've been to multiple countries. I went to look at very, very many different grading schemes, technology that is used to measure and manage within those grading schemes. We have the Meat Standard Australia, the MSA system, the USDA system from the United States, the Japanese Meat Grading Association, and Europe. It's interesting to note that Europe's 3 points of interest are just that, just 3 points of interest. Those points of interest do not reflect on eating quality. If you look at MSA, USDA, or JMG, We have marbling being considered, meat colour, which affects the point of purchase, pH, which will affect your water holding capacity, the succulence during eating. Hanging method affects tenderisation, and cooking method, which is particularly important because we do know we make all the effort to produce really good meat, and sometimes the consumer lets us down in the kitchen. Now, I realise that the grading inputs on this are for beef. MSA has been adapted for lamb, and they are now also working on one for pork. So my belief would be that to make the most comprehensive system, we should be combining aspects of the USDA and the Australia together. And also, I should say, I'm a scientist, and I do realise that meat texture and meat firmness do not correlate well with eating quality. However, the US and Japan both use this as part of their discussions when trading meat. And if we want to be able to work with them, trade with them, and develop market products that they are going to want, we should be speaking the same language. The MLA developed a system around the consumer being king. They talk about the empty chair representing the consumer. The consumer is not present around the meeting table when we make our business decisions, but they must be considered. Yes, a business needs to be economically viable, but essentially it must have a consumer to be sustainable. Every business decision should be aimed at improving the consumer's experience. The MLA grading system rewards those farmers that produce meat that has the best eating quality. While in Australia, I spent time with Mark Inglis, who is the JBS Assurance and Supply Chain Manager for the entirety of Australia. As a farmer himself, he has also worked with the MLA, and he was working for them when they rolled out the MSA grading system. So I can safely say he sat at all sides of the fence. He was really good to talk to. He gave a very balanced input on how we should progress things going forward. And he was quite frank. We will always need yak in a box, commodity meat, cheaply produced. However, he highlighted the need to make sure if you aren't or can't compete on price, then you need to make sure that premium branded products are assessed and managed. Any product expected to fail the specifications for eating quality should be downgraded so that your brand is protected. This is something that he is doing within his own business, and we all know how big JBS is. And we have to also remember that we are in a global market. I've already shown we export a third of what we're producing. With the compound annual growth, most of the market we're looking at is focused towards Asia. We know that we can't compete on price, so we must compete on eating quality. And if we don't measure it, we can't manage it. Without a consumer, we don't have an industry. It starts and ends with the consumer. So the conclusions are, the consumer is king. The eating quality experience should be at the forefront of all business decisions. Red meat cannot compete on price. We know that we have a higher cost of production than some systems. We have high welfare standards. We should be marketing on this, but we should make sure that our brand is maintained by monitoring eating quality. If you don't measure it, you can't manage it. We need to measure meat quality and reward producers accordingly to drive change. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Bob Bansbach for his unwavering support throughout my entire Nuffield journey, for Anne Beckett for her patience during my editing process for my report, to my parents, Hilton and Jane Mitchell, my brother Nicholas, and his wife Harriet, for all their support throughout the last 18 months. Thank you.